Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where I have a guest that's been actually listening to the podcast for quite some time, Delyth, and we're going to be talking about generally how you manage being a bodybuilder and such a busy mum. You know, you've got a high pressure job at times and lots going on outside of bodybuilding. So it'd be really nice to delve into how you manage that and also your journey as a bodybuilder, because it's always inspiring to hear how people have started out and then how they've got on and what their aspirations are for the future. So first of all, thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm super, super excited. As you said, I'm a big fan of podcasts. I found the podcast in the last prep I did, and it saw me through a tremendous amount of cardio when my playlist was getting pretty tired, and then I found this, and yeah, so I'm really excited. Thank you.
No problem. It's always a pleasure to have listeners on, and anyone in the community. As we met, at a show in 2019 at NFM, you do get that vibe with certain people when you compete, don't you? And then
definitely
follow that through and start to grow a relationship. It's super cool, and it's also something I talk about on the pod. As you know, you don't see people all the time that you meet at shows. We're all from around the globe, and then when you can keep that connection there through Instagram and things, it's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that really shocked me about bodybuilding shows was the camaraderie that exists backstage. And yeah, I had totally wrongly assumed, because I had no experience of the bodybuilding world. I don't have any friends that compete. It was literally brand new to me. So I was like a fish out of water. And I wrongly assumed that it would be quite a bitchy, competitive environment on the female side in particular. And it was just so fantastic with the first show I did and the subsequent shows to realize actually it's the total opposite of that. And I think for good reason, because you know how hard you've worked to be in the condition you're in, and you know what you've done to get there. So if you see another female and they, you think, wow, look at her delts, look at her glutes, look at her condition, and you think, yeah, she is way better than me. There's nothing you can feel but pure respect, so yeah, it's a fantastic community to be a part of.
Yeah, I think it's so important to get that message across as well, because, of course you do meet people at shows that are in their own lane and maybe they don't socialize like we do when we're at shows, and that's totally cool. And I think that, I've definitely learned over the years that I don't take that personally. Some people do that, but you can make such good relationships in this sport. It blows my mind still. And like you say, there's a mutual respect that doesn't need to be explained. You just get it.
Yeah, I found interestingly, being a scientist and being a sort of a bit of a mathematician. So as my job, I'm a vet, so my background is maths and science, and I like statistics, I like graphs, I like numbers, a bit of a geek. I found a positive correlation between whether I have sort of engaged with people at a show and if I feel like I'm helping others and how I've done on the stage. I've had quite a few shows where I've been in my own head, really, panicking, imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. Am I going to look silly? Am I going, all of these things. And then for whatever reason, I've spotted somebody who's panicking more than me. And I think it's maybe the mum in me then that I've sort of gone into overdrive of trying to ensure that I help them, which means I totally forget about my own journey. And then very quickly you're on the stage. And yeah, when I look back through all those shows, when I've found somebody that has, just needed that bit of support and I've given it, I've actually done phenomenally well on the stage. So it's quite, it just goes to show, doesn't it? I think respect for the people that decide to be in their own lane, but for me personally, that's the worst place I can be.
Yeah, I've actually found exactly the same. Like, there's so much more of a positive outcome for me. And even, if you don't place at a show, but you've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The
you know.
whole thing that we've talked about, a few times about this sport is that, yes, it's absolutely brutal, but we love it. There is so much enjoyment in it. And ultimately, the pinnacle of the journey is that show day. And on so many occasions, my only goal has been to stand on that stage and really feel the joy and feel that accomplishment of I'm here, you know, I'm here and I've achieved it. And just to really take a moment and soak that in when you're on the stage. And again, I think if that is your main goal, there's always going to be aspirations of placing, and especially when you've done well in previous shows, it'd be wrong to, you know, we're competitive people naturally. You can't really be a bodybuilder without being naturally very competitive. But if that is your main goal, I don't see how you can lose, you know, and taking, like you say, taking that enjoyment from other people in the show and enjoying it as a community is, has just been one of the best things for me.
Yeah, and of course, if you can, you know, develop your physique, and when you step back on stage, if you've competed before, if you can see there's an improvement in your physique, that's a massive win. You know, if you can notice that, and then if you do well, you know, that's then your cherry on top almost. And like you say, we are competitive, so we're probably not going to be doing this sport if we don't have that urge to win. But there is so much more to that when you look at your whole journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's been, you know, again, one of the quite different things for me, because with my career so going through school, I went to just a, you know, normal primary school, and my mum said, you know, yeah, you're doing very well, but always remember, she said, you're a big fish in a small pond. Just, you know, you're a big fish in a small pond. So I went to comprehensive school, same thing, did really well, and everyone saying, you're a big fish in a small pond, remember that. Just really so you don't almost get too confident and too cocky, but you know, you become, as a vet, you become used to being top of the class, A grade student. And so in bodybuilding, to flip that on its head, to not sort of have to associate being at the top with winning, in inverted commas, is quite novel, has been quite novel to me. But as we've said, it's a hobby, and it's the enjoyment of the whole journey. Show day is obviously just a small part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all those, I find when I compete, you know, when you're on the stage, all of those early morning cardio sessions all on your own, you know, really pushing yourself. And then those days where you wake up and you think, I don't know how I'm going to get through today. I will. But, you know, especially at the tail end of a prep, I think that it's important for people to know that considering going into competing, that it does get tough towards the end, but also, as we've spoken about several times, you know, this is a choice, and this is something that we're privileged to do. But, you know, it is good to have that awareness of it is tough, and there's things that you've got to, I don't like to say sacrifice, but in essence it is, you know, meals out, things like this. But that journey is so important to remember how far you've come and what you've put in.
And this is it. I think it is all about choices. The gym I train, I sort of fell into the sport by accident. So I had a couple of children, and I was moaning, basically. I was moaning about my baby weight, and I didn't have unrealistic expectations. I didn't expect to, you know, get back to where I was before. I had 2 children who were wonderful, but I just really was unhappy. And my husband, who is the most supportive, wonderful man, booked me some personal training sessions, and he said, you know, you don't have to do this. I'm not booking this for me. I'm not saying you know, you need this, but you were moaning and I'm trying to help, which is all he ever does. He really is wonderful. So I went along and met my my personal trainer, so Richard Rees at Team Rees Gym, and it isn't a bodybuilding gym. So Rich has competed previously, and I sort of fell into it very much by accident. And I think at the start I didn't realize how hard it would be, but equally, like you say, I think yes, there are sacrifices, choices, you know, to make, and it's just at the very start almost making a list and saying, well, okay, am I doing a, you know, maybe if you're looking at a 12-week prep, maybe you're not looking at a show, but maybe you're just looking to put a block of training down, you know, as a trial run. And it's, for me, I look at those 12 weeks and I look at the things, the social occasions that might, you know, be going on throughout that. And almost it sounds harsh, but pick which are worth it, which are essential. So some are non-negotiable. Some might be nice to do, but hey, it's 12 weeks. You know, for me, it's a bit like when I was pregnant. So like, it's 9 months. You know, so what? I've got to give up, you know, alcohol and this and that. It's 9 months. You know, it's not a long time. 12 weeks for prep, if you know, a typical 12 to 40, it's not a long time. So there might be things that might go by the wayside, but equally it's learning how you can manage other things. There's so many things where you can still go along and take part. So meals out might get tricky, but you know, drinks out, cinema, you know, all these sorts of things. It's actually really easy if you're organized to sort of weave it in. But then, yes, like you say, it's realizing it is a tough sport. And what made me think of Rich was he always says, if it was easy, everyone would do it. It's
And
supposed
you
to be
forget
hard.
that people don't. Yeah.
It's supposed to be hard. So when it gets hard, you know you're doing it right to an extent. And I think, again, we've talked about this briefly, but having that, you know, person watching you and guiding you so that if it gets too hard and your health is threatened by it, that they can pull you back. And you know, having that coaching element is really important too.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good thing that you raised there about, you know, you can still take part in activities and still, you know, be part of family and friends gatherings, things like this. And I actually work with a client, D, who listens to the pod, and she's had phenomenal results in just 3 weeks. And she had a social occasion and she cooked for the rest of the family. She did a certain meal and then she cooked her separately. And they are really supportive of her journey, you know, and her being open and honest and telling them exactly what she's trying to do. You know, it really does facilitate being able to still have, you know, a party at home. You know, if you can have people over, you can control what you eat. And then, you know, like you say, with a coach, there's ways that you can actually learn from that coach to tackle social scenarios as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when I was thinking about how sort of typically do I approach it, it normally starts with setting the goal, because unless you've got a clear idea of where you're going, how are you going to get there? So obviously you've got to set that goal, but then it's also really being honest with yourself, I think, and saying, well, is this achievable? You know, so if I'm saying I'm going to do a show in 12 weeks time, but actually I know I'm nowhere near where I would typically need to be 12 weeks out, that is going to be a brutal 12 weeks. It's perhaps, you know, going to put too much pressure on the family. Perhaps you have got several weekends away. Maybe you've got wedding anniversaries, you know, so it's being realistic and honest with yourself, I think, because the pull of a show day, and again, we're competitive, we like having deadlines, but it's good to be under pressure, but it's being realistic, isn't it? To say, well, is it achievable? And I then work backwards to say, well, okay, what are my priorities in that time for work, for my family, and obviously then weaving in the bodybuilding around that. What are the timelines? Make that plan, but you hit the nail on the head for me, is communicating it with your immediate circle, because if they know, there's so many occasions now where I'll be going around to a friend's house. You know, there might be things like Macmillan coffee mornings and things like that. I don't have to explain that I'm not going to be eating the cake. You know, the tenner's going to go in the pot anyway. It makes no, I'll still bake, I'll still, you know, but I don't have to explain, because I've had those conversations already. And I think that's really useful to do in advance. And even things like, again, being a working mum, there's things like commitments with the schools, so the Parent Teacher Association, the PTA, you know. So I know in that 12-week block, there's no way I can be running a market stall for the summer fair, and it's just not going to happen. So to actually speak to those people in advance and say, look, you know, I'm not going to be able to help in this scenario. Is there something I can do now? Is there something I can, you know, or is there a future event you can write me down for? So that when people almost ask, oh, can you do X, Y, Z? I think being able to say no is really important. But if like me, you feel guilt with the children and children's activities, mums suffer a lot of guilt around, you know, we're not doing enough, we're not baking enough, we're not doing enough crafts. So it's trying to say, I can't do that, but could I, you know, and it might be another project that you can fit in. So yeah, communicating it with your immediate circle is so important, but even to an extent, the wider circle, if you know there's something in that 12 weeks that you're not going to be able to commit to.
I think there's sort of that undercurrent there as well, like where you're saying, you know, that it sometimes feels like almost a sign of weakness to say no, especially, you know, personalities that are attracted to bodybuilding. We're overachievers. We always want to do as much as possible. And actually, you know, you need to prep if you want to, you know, nail your prep, do well at your show, it's really important to prioritize that alongside your other commitments. And you're going to need to say no at some points, but I've definitely been there in the past where I just overcommit to so many things. And then, you know, like you say at the start, health implications and things, if you're doing so many things as well as prepping, you know, it really does start to be detrimental to, if your stress is up from overcommitting, it can have an impact on your physique. You know, there's so many things that go into a prep, especially when you get to that, you know, tail end where everything's micromanaged, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're starting out, if you're new to the sport, or even if you're not, it still sometimes surprises me at the tail end quite how mentally taxing it is to you know, manage your basic day-to-day things. And yeah, each time it does catch me by surprise. But then in the last prep that I've done, I have taken, it sounds weird, but I've taken some sort of enjoyment out of that to think, okay, this is getting really tough now. My condition must be coming in. You know?
It's cathartic.
So it must be getting where you know, where I need to be. And yeah, I do think that having the ability to sort of say no and try and avoid feeling that guilt is something I still struggle with. Yeah, terribly. So I used to bake cakes for, well, I baked them for my own kids, and they were all right. They were nothing sort of to write home about. And I started doing them for some friends' children. And before I knew it, I was doing a couple of months. I was doing them at 2 a.m. because I just didn't have time to, you know, each cake and sort of making all of these layers and all of this stuff, you know, it's really time consuming. And actually, it was my husband who said, you know, I think you need to just, the next person asks, I think you just need to say no. I didn't charge for them, that I didn't.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah. And he said, you know, you just, and he said, why are you saying yes? You know, they're extended people, some of them you barely even know. You just, and the first thing I'd said was, I just feel guilty saying no, you know. And I think that is something, you're right. I think we see it as a bit of a sign of failure. And I mean, look, I still struggle with it. Look, there's cake there. See? Not this morning. That's not a plant. No, that actually is, I think, the only one I've done this year. Who's a very good friend of mine's 18th. Her son's 18th. So that is one that I committed to. But yeah, I'm still terrible at it. And I think within bodybuilding, as you said, when it does get hard, you do need to prioritize, and your sleep, you know, so important and so difficult to do.
Well, even, you know, if you have one night that's compromised of sleep, it can actually, you know, if you don't regain that sleep the following night, if it sort of spirals, as it were, then it can really have a massive impact on how you feel, but also how your physique reacts.
Absolutely. And there are so many factors that you can control. And I think being a mum who's training, then there are some factors that you just can't. So I know when I did my first show in 2019, so my daughter then was really young. So I was training really early mornings, like up at 5, and then really late nights, because she would only allow me to sort of put her to bed. You know, I'd done the majority of the childcare to that point. Husband's brilliant, and she'd be screaming, and you know, she'd have woken up in the night. I'd be going to the gym, and he'd say, "I'm their dad. I can do it." But the pull of the child crying, where you know, I know you want to try, but it's going to take me 10 minutes to settle her. It's going to take you an hour and a half. You're both going to be stressed. So, you know, there's so many factors as a mum, and you can't necessarily then catch up on sleep if they've then got chicken pox.
Yeah.
You know, it did so, and if that happens in the middle of your prep, and it, you know, it does. So I think it's making sure that you've got such an organized life as a mum, and that's why typically I will train in the morning, because if something happens in the day in school, if they're sent home ill, or you feel like, well, at least I've got a block of my training done.
Yeah.
You know, at least I've got my steps in, at least I, you know, so that I like to get going early in the morning while everybody's asleep. Just
Yeah.
quickly try and tick some boxes.
I
Yeah.
spoke to Shelley about this on last week's pod, you know, because she's a mum and she's got several things that she's committed to business wise. And she said the main point for her on how to manage all of this is trying to schedule it and make,
Yeah.
you know, even if it's lists, you know, like when we put the
Yeah.
pod in your diary, you write it on an actual diary, because
Yeah.
it's, especially in prep as well, there's so many things you think, was I meant to do that today? Was I meant to do that today?
Absolutely. And again, that's been one of the, I've sort of naturally been quite an organized person since having the children. I think actually being an organized mum massively lends itself to being a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So people would say like, oh, how on earth do you do with kids? Well, there's a couple of types of parent, and I don't at all judge how you parent. For me personally, I wanted, when I saw all these pretty cool people going like, oh, I just wing it, you know, we don't have a set bedtime. Yeah, we go with the flow, we do this, we do that. And I thought, yeah, well, I want to be that. I want to be that cool mum that just wings it. And, you know, yeah, we'll just do this today. There's no plan. I wanted that, right? I tried it. Holy Mother of God, it did not work, right? I need structure. My kids are the identical, like mini me's. They need structure, they need routine, they need consistency. Perfect, because that's what bodybuilding is, isn't it? Routine, structure, consistency. So as a mum, I quite quickly got organized, and they're silly things, but they work. So even down to, you know, where their swimming kit is kept in a particular bag in the airing cupboard with the goggles and the towels and the kit. So that if one day on prep I'm tired and I can't get up the stairs, you know, or I really am standing at the wrong stairs thinking, I don't want to go up these stairs.
Yeah, I get that.
The kids can just nip up, just say, kids, you know where the kit is, can you go and grab it? And it's organized, it's ready. And I think that actually, weirdly, sort of developing ways to manage being a busy vet and a busy mum actually just naturally then meant bodybuilding slotted in much easier than you'd think. And like for prep, one of the biggest things I would say, not just for mums, but looking at that 12 weeks, yes, I look at the social events, but what I also do is I look at all of the birthdays, all of the gifts that I would need to buy,
Yeah.
and I literally buy them before prep starts. I buy them, wrap them, write on the cards, and they go at the bottom of the wardrobe. And so I don't then even have to think, as you get in further along the prep, think, oh gosh, you know, it's my son's best friend's birthday. What are we going to buy? You know, last minute dash to Tesco when actually you should be going to do your cardio block.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to let your kids down and you feel this guilt. And so, yeah, I found that sounds daft, but anything I can do in advance of prep, any little bit of admin, I just get it done, it's out of the way. So
Yeah.
that then if one of the kids is unwell or if something happens in work, I do have a bit more flex in my system than I would, you know, ordinarily. So yeah, that's helped me loads.
Would you say
And
that
lists.
is there certain life skills that you've gained from bodybuilding that have then transferred into, because obviously you've gained a lot of skills from being organized and from motherhood and, you know, having a career. Is there certain things that bodybuilding has then given back to that as well?
Definitely. I think they just go hand in hand, and I think they sort of reinforce each other continuously. What I've really enjoyed is bringing my children on board. Sorry, that's my dog. She's called
Mine's
Janice.
the dog as well.
She's a Jack Russell. She's called Janice, so she's
What a
chocolate.
name.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to see me, can you? So this is Janice.
You get extra bonus points for having a dog.
Dogs, yeah. Oh, who wouldn't have a dog? It's just, yeah, it's the best. And actually, that is so essential in prep, getting those steps in. Having a breeder dog that'll just go all day, she'll, you know, she will just literally, she'll put in as many steps as you want. It's amazing. But yeah, the children, they've never been to a competition. I'm a lot cautious about how much they see. I count myself as very, very lucky that I've never had, prior to bodybuilding, I've never had any body image issues. I've never had any eating disorders. I've been very lucky in that regard. And I got into bodybuilding when I was already happily married with 2 children. So my journey, I feel very lucky with how I found this sport, whereas I'm very cautious with my son and my daughters. They're 7 and 10 now, but they were really young when I started. They were sort of 2 and 5. That they don't grow up expecting that a woman or a man needs to look a certain way. So I'm cautious in that regard with the aesthetics of it. But with regards to so many other things, bodybuilding gives so much back. So with regards, you know, the structure of training, talking to them about nutrition, you know, they know how good carbs, proteins, you know, good fats, they know an awful lot about that side of things. And yeah, they you know, they know about training hard, rest days. And so I think there's an awful lot of benefit with regards to the sport that you can pass on to you know, the kids without it being too much or detrimental. But ultimately, I think it's a mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
That, you know, the sport can be sort of summed up in really it's having that mindset to just keep going, which again I think is, you know, it's just not a bad attribute in life.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it in regards to, you know, potentially not exposing them to an actual show just yet, because the way the world is at the moment as well, you know, even for people that are older, you know, like us, you can end up, social media can really overtake your brain on how
Absolutely.
you look, you know, what you should be striving for. Are you doing enough? And if you then expose, you know, younger people to that, and then they've got the pressures of social media already in this day and age, it could end up, like you say, facilitating how they feel they should look a certain way.
It is, it's tricky. And I know lots of people do take their children to shows, and it's a tough one because I understand that as well, because they see how hard you're training, and the children are so proud. They are so proud, you know, and they understand to an extent what I'm doing, and you know, they've seen photos and things like that. So don't hide it entirely, but I do hide the dieting down parts of it, and you know, they would never know that you know, the calories I'm on, or the counting, or you know, because again, it is an extreme sport. It's not for everyone, and I would just really like them to grow up having a very normal relationship with food and their body image, especially at being so young. But as you say, there's huge pressures in social media, and very unrealistic pressures when, you know, that's been one of the things that I've really enjoyed about your podcast again, and social media posts, is the sort of honesty of them, of saying, yeah, you know, this might be how I look on show day. This is how I look on the off season, you know, and this is the sport. And I think there's a huge amount, particularly with younger girls, sort of trying to achieve and maintain a certain look year round, and certainly a certain level of body fat just wouldn't, in my mind, it wouldn't be what I want for my daughter or my son, then, putting it that way.
For sure. It'd be quite interesting actually to touch on, because we're both at a similar point of doing that reverse out and going into our off-season phase, how you've actually found that transition maybe compared to previous seasons, and how you're feeling this time around.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I've handled it a lot better this time. I think part of that is, a big part of that is having a full coach on board. So basically, I work with Lou and Paul, and whereas in the past I've basically seen show day as the end point, because originally I was only going to do one show, was definitely only doing one.
It happens to us all.
Oh, here we are 4 years later. Yeah. And yeah, so having those guys with Team Kaiser really kind of mapping the journey and saying, well, what do you want afterwards, and having those conversations, that's been invaluable. But I think as well, and again, I know I'm saying I'm not blowing sunshine up your backside, but it's true, listening to the podcasts, and it was only just in the last prep that I did that I found them, realizing that post-show period, it is normal to have struggles. They're going to happen unless you have a plan. And if you just sort of focus a show day as that's the end point, and you don't have a plan afterwards, I'd likened it to some friends the other day. So it's like having one of those really bouncy balls, one of those really sort of small bouncy balls. And show day, you throw that ball as hard as you can, and in the immediate post-show period, the bounce is just huge. Yeah. You get a massive dump of emotions and tiredness and hormones and elation, up, down, up, down. You're allowed to eat. You don't feel you should. There's all of these strange things that happen as a result of being so institutionalized with food and exercise and the way you look. Yeah. But then eventually that bounce, it gets less and less and less, and eventually it stops. And it's trying to identify, okay, what factors can I put in place which makes the bounce smaller? Because there's no way I'm going to throw that ball any less. Show day, you're gonna give it your all. So it's putting those things in place, and I think you get better the more you do. I think as well, the people around you get better at supporting you through it, perhaps. So again, Tom's been amazing. I know you've had differences in your prep with kind of having a supportive partner or not.
Yeah.
And having a plan, having a diet to go to, as opposed to just thinking it's this amazing free for all, and eating to the point of being really uncomfortable every day. So I think this, for me, the last prep, I think, has been the best I've handled it. But also, as we touched on, because I had a family holiday 3 days later.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
So that was a pure fluke, because I didn't expect to get an invite to the final. So it's 2 finals, which was amazing. I'd intended to do the Saxon Classic, PCA Saxon Classic, in March, because that was cancelled in 2020. And I was stage ready when it was cancelled. We were like 2 and a bit weeks out. I was pretty much ready. Oh. And so when that was cancelled, that was horrendous. I was angry for it. I'm still angry.
I know it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't sit. I've met a lot of competitors that are actually quite scarred by the COVID chronicles of prep.
That was to have the journey of prep and that grueling side of things you put yourself through, and then not have anything to sort of show for it. And I guess, again, there was a lot going on in the world. So had I been in my normal sort of state of mind without everything being locked down, perhaps I would have been able to say, well, no, it's not that I've got nothing to show for it. I've learned loads about how carb responsive I am, about how if I manipulate the fats that this happened, that, you can look back and think, no, there's loads that I've gained. Yeah. But at the time, there was nothing I'd gained. The world was horrendous, and you
can't get out your own head in those scenarios sometimes.
No, took a good 3 weeks for me to pull myself out of that hole. I was so cross, but so my intention was just to do the Saxon Classic in March, because that was taken from me, and I just wanted to claw that back. So that was the discussion I'd had with everybody, partner,
doing it.
Yeah. And then I got the invite to the British final. And as I walked off stage and I looked at this piece of paper where the air was blue, I just swore and swore and swore, because this isn't what I signed up for. But I know in my heart of hearts, I can't not do this. It was an amazing thing to be given that opportunity. I thought, wow, what an honor. I'm going to end up doing it, even though it's in October, and so then I'd done some, what I considered like warm-up shows, really, the FitX, and I wasn't expecting to enjoy competing with that federation as much as I absolutely loved it. They were fantastic, brilliant show, and it was really big Welsh show. and I came second overall show. So that was amazing. So then I thought, I need to do their finals.
Yeah.
So my family holiday just was a pure fluke. I had the PCA finals one Saturday, 7 days later I had the FitX finals, and then 3 days later went to Lanzarote. And having that was just absolutely brilliant, because again, even though I trained, I did some running, there was a gym there, did some strength and conditioning stuff, it was naturally, you're on holiday, it was naturally at a lower pace, it was fun. The food is different, isn't it? So when you're abroad, it's nice to try little bits of different food, as opposed to if you're at home, perhaps you're just going to be stuffing on your, well, I can only speak for myself, but the Reese's peanut butter cups.
Yes.
Like, surely that's all the nutrition I need for the next month. No, Delyth, it's really not.
My levels of respect for you have just gone up a lot.
Honestly, just for my birthday, so it was my birthday last week, and I had this awesome two sets of people actually sent me Reese's peanut butter things. One was like this full goodie box, amazing. The other was a bag bits with various peanut butter cups, but also a lip balm, a Reese's peanut butter lip balm. I haven't opened it yet because I just think, is this going to send me into like some sort of catastrophic spiral?
Yeah, that would be like, this is my savior.
So I'm gonna give that a go. I'll report back to you. I'm gonna give that a go. But yeah, so I think that was really, really good. And again, I'd encourage anybody to book something really quickly after a show, because it does just allow you, sort of forces you to relax.
Yeah.
Gives you the break that your body will definitely need. Gives some time back as well to the people who have probably given a lot of sacrifices along the way with you. So whether it's children or husband or, etc., friends, but also, in a nutrition point of view, you can't really go crazy. You're on holiday, you're trying things. It's just a different vibe, isn't it, with how you approach food. And I managed to stop myself taking the weigh-in scales, just to be like, you know what, let's just have a normal, in inverted commas, week. So yeah, that's definitely something I've done for the first time, which I'd really encourage people to consider doing if you can.
Yeah, I think that, it is super important to think about, like you say, giving back to your family and friends and people that have supported your prep. And if because you've done a few preps like myself, and I actually went on holiday quite soon after the finals as well, you can, I guess, flex your right to be using your education and the tools you've built in prep and as a bodybuilder to actually put it into practice and go, okay, so I'm going to have a nice palate experience here, but I'm going to have X, Y, and Z rather than I'm going to have everything. It gives you like almost like little tests, but you can really gain from that, because of course, when you're going into an off season, or if you're not going to compete again, you need to get used to, embracing more foods, being able to not be in that mindset of self-restricting, as it were.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, it is quite a hard transition in regards to, like you say, you have your show day, and then really you've got that choice and that freedom to, if you wanted to, ideally not, but you could eat and do whatever you wanted to do because the show's not there. So if you're able to, I guess, expose yourself a little bit to scenarios and be able to maintain control, it can be very, very cathartic.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, what I've sort of done now that I'm very much now into the off season is to say, well, actually, there's some elements of my sort of prep diet that I really like. So my favorite breakfast in the whole wide world is my oats with my scoop of whey. It's a particular flavor that I like. And it just gives me a bit of a sense of grounding that each morning I do actually weigh that. So I am having 60 grams of oats, boiling water on, scoop of whey. It's just a routine, but it starts my day in the right way. So then, whereas now I'm not weighing my chicken, broccoli, sweet potato evening meal, because you've done so many preps, and because even if you've done a 12-week prep, you roughly know what would be considered a portion where you're trying to grow, a portion where you're trying to cut, a portion, you roughly can tell visually, can't you, what you should be having. But I do like to start the day a bit like I like to get up early and train and tick those boxes. I like to sort of start it in quite a positive, I feel a positive way to say, yeah, well, and I love it anyway. I love that breakfast. There's no chore. And it just allows me to keep a level of control. And yeah, I can't really see a time where I would stop doing that, which for some people, you know, may well say, gosh, that's extreme. You're going to weigh your porridge every single morning for the rest of your life.
I like it though.
It just gives me, yeah, like I say, it's backing out of that insanely strict, you know, regime you've been on, and just gently bringing yourself out of it. Because I think if you do, certainly my first couple of preps, I went from, you know, 0 to hero. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. And I didn't know. So I had this terrible, because you weren't doing the podcast at the time, but I also in 2019, there was a less on social media. It wasn't as popular. The sports really exploded, I think, in the last sort of couple of years. So I also had this thing in my head that, you know, I'm so weak. You know, I've done this show. I've achieved all these amazing things. Why now, in the sort of 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, why can I not control my eating? You know, I've just eaten a huge meal. I should feel full. I don't. Why not? Why do I not feel full? It must be me. It must be. And so hearing your podcasts, actually, again, and hearing, you know, one really successful competitor, after her first show, said it took her 8 or 9 months to settle down. And I think, again, it's so important with having then the coaching side of it, somebody you can be honest with. So yeah, like when I got back from holiday, you know, Paul and Lou said, right, you know, let's do a check-in, you know, and sending them the weight. And yeah, I remember sending the weight and the little emoji. I'm like, oh, what have I done? Yeah, having that guidance and realizing that it is normal, that doesn't mean it's good. So it's normal to not feel full. It's normal, you know, but we can use all of the skills we've learned through prep to actually back out of it. It's almost like prep shouldn't be considered 12 weeks. It should be considered maybe 24.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that, you know,
sure.
12 coming down and then 12 coming back up again. Your goals are within the season. But yeah, it's definitely a journey that you get better at, which is, I think, why it's so addictive. When you think you're going to do one show, you realize you've learned so much that it's almost a shame not to do another. And then
Yeah.
you keep going.
Yeah, it's definitely something, you know, you mentioned at the start about your trainer saying, you know, if it was that easy, everyone would do it. And I always thought back in the day when I first started out, if you commit to a date and you've decided a competition, in my mind, there was no negotiation to that. I would always do that competition. And then as the years have gone on, I've realized, you know, actually, this is why I try and praise that it's an achievement getting to stage alone, let alone anything else, is because there is a hell of a lot of people that do need to pull out of a prep for various reasons. You know, it could be something happening in the family or for health or, you know, a change of circumstances. And actually, we are part of a very small percentage that actually make it to the stage.
Okay. It's interesting because I saw some stats for the Welsh Ironman, and I thought, I wish we could see this for our sport, where it basically it said, you know, number of participants registered, and it was a bar chart, and then number who, you know, enrolled on the day, number who started, because even the ones who enrolled on the day before, didn't then necessarily start the next day, so even overnight. And then, you know, and it went down to then number completed. And literally the graph went from a huge number to very few. And I thought, wow, that would be so interesting to know. And you're never going to be able to measure that, because the number of people who would, they wouldn't necessarily even sort of pay or register for a show, but just the number of people that set out and say, I am going to do X show. And then, you know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and this has happened to people I know, they said, oh, I couldn't give up my wine on the weekends.
Yeah, I know, but it's true, isn't it?
What? But
think because
until you try, you don't know.
Yeah, and I definitely get to that point where I think, because I can do it, I think, well, I used to think, not now, but I used to think, well, if I can do it, then anyone can do it, but they can't.
No, they can't. And it's also funny, a very good friend of mine, and I had this conversation with her about 2 weeks ago. She regularly says, oh, you know, I find you inspiring and this, that, and the other. And I say, can just stop. I feel guilty when you say that, because it's this is just my mindset. I don't understand how you could say you were going to do something and not do it. I'm the other way, right? That's just how I'm made. I'm not better than anyone. That is just my mindset. So it's not like I feel I have to, dig to these depths to sort of persevere. It's just like, well, no, it's the same as things like, the diet side of things. So I would always want to stand on stage knowing that I've done everything within my life that I am prepared to do to be at my best. Yeah. Now, that might be totally different. It might be more, it might be way less than the girl next to me, but I know I haven't had any slip-ups, zero, none. Because the way my mind works is if I have one slip-up, oh, that's the end of the world. It's all gone, forget it. I'm not, that's me. Very much I'm all or nothing. And so in bodybuilding, it naturally is all, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be really interested to know, because a few people have said to me, in the past, how many was that out of then? If I've said, I placed third, or, how many was that out of? And it sometimes feels, not embarrassing, that's the wrong word, but it doesn't sound like as much of an achievement as it is if you say, there were 6 of us.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
That's 3 out of 6. That's okay, I suppose, but, when you consider actually, the number that will have intended on starting a journey to arrive at that show, reality would I think be quite different, because it is tough. As we've said, it's tough, but we love it. So,
it's our choice. How are you finding, you said about messaging your coach sort of your scale weight and checking photos and things. How are you finding embracing weight gain post show?
Yeah, I think, being completely honest, I better this time again than previously. Nobody likes it. I don't think anybody, I don't know, maybe I only know inside my own brain. I can't imagine that many females in particular would enjoy going from, super lean. I love the pro tan. I love the orange.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Once all of that comes off and being, soft and fluffy, and even when one of the kids was lying on the sofa cutching in, that's a Welsh word, being all cutched in,
cuddling up.
and there'd been just a couple of nice normal things. So my son had a project to do for school on China, and we'd gone to an Asian supermarket and we'd bought some ingredients to make some traditional Chinese food. But while we were there, they conned me out to some Chinese sweets. As they do, kids, and so they'd said, Mummy, would you like one? They're delicious. Do you want to try? And I said, yeah, go on then. And they both went, what? Mummy's eating sweets. They're just totally out of context to them. And obviously I would potentially have, some Haribo or whatever, but pre-training, for the very specific timings. It wouldn't just be off the cuff. So that side of things has been really nice. And I sat down, we'd made this Chinese dish, and then we were flopped on the sofa, and I sort of said, my son cutched in, and it was just really lovely. And I said, is it nice to have Mummy back now that, sort of finished with the bodybuilding for now? And, and he said, yeah, it's lovely. And, you're all soft. I said, straight away, what do you mean? He said, well, you're just like, you're not different. Hard like you were, especially around here. You're not hard and lumpy. Like, yep, what you're saying is the abs have gone. Yeah. So it's like instant bad mood.
It's crazy, isn't it? How Matt and I were talking about this the other day when he did a photo shoot prep, and he was like, I didn't see abs for a while, and then like 4 days out, his abs came through, and then within like 4 days they're gone. And it's like, he did like 6 months, and then it's like 8 days of seeing the abs, and then they're gone.
Yeah. And so I think, being completely honest, no, I don't enjoy it. But, and I think again, is the part of the skill of kind of really embracing bodybuilding, sport, being active, the feeling that you have so I enjoy a lot of classes at my gym. So, like I say, it's not a traditional bodybuilding gym, but they have lots of triathletes, and they have a strength and conditioning sort of class. So there's a bit of CrossFit style stuff going on. There are bodybuilders there too. It's just kind of a bit of everything, which I really like. I really like having different people to talk to, different experiences. They've got an amazing spin setup, all these sorts of things. So like last night I did a spin class, and Yeah, sure. Being, what am I now, 63 kilos, I think, stage weight's like 54. But when they say, right, whack the gears on and see what your max wattage is, how much power can you put down in 10 seconds? When all of a sudden that number's doubled compared to what it would be on prep, it's embracing that, isn't it? And recognizing that, again, you can't grow if you're constantly cutting. It's impossible. And so you have to embrace those changes. And also, I think it's been the best for me this year because of the timings, because now that it's getting colder and the old polar neck's coming out, it was actually really quite nice I've never really had that before. I've always done early shows, and then had my kind of bouncing ball bit through the summer, which has been, tougher. But yeah, I think it's also trying to, it really depends what you want, doesn't it? Physique wise, I like to look strong.
Yeah.
So I don't really like to look skinny. So yeah, again, I think that helps. That's just my preference. I think I look, because I'm 42, I'm old. I think when I go skinny and I think I just really look older. So actually, I think, yeah, having a bit of mass and looking and feeling strong as well. So my whole journey really started because my son sat down in the middle of the road. He'd come out of school, he was 3 and a bit, and he was having a paddy, and he just sat down in the middle of the road with cars and everything else. And I had my daughter, who was a newborn, or 6 months old, whatever, strapped to my chest in one of these sling things. And I picked him up and I slung him on my back. And the hill that I used to live on was ridiculously steep. So it was a real slog getting to the top with the two of them, and him kicking off and arms and legs going. And we got to the house and he said, "Mummy, will you always carry me? If I need to be carried, will you always carry me?"
Oh.
Now, the backstory here is my husband is 6'8" and 19 and a half, 20 stone. He's a massive human. He's not a bodybuilder. He lifts weights, but he's not a competitive bodybuilder. It's gigantic. My children are exactly the same. They are huge. And I looked at my son and said, "If you need to, I will always find a way to carry you." And the next day then was when I rejoined the gym and thought, right, you're gonna have to lift some weights. So I do enjoy being strong, and you've got to accept that when you're stage lean, you're a very weak human being, aren't you? You look insanely strong, but actually you could barely lift up a pen.
Yeah, like you said earlier about walking up the stairs and, normal daily tasks, you forget sometimes until you get back into a prep, where it gets to that point where you consider, how easy can I make it to get up these stairs? Because at the moment I don't want to walk up a flight of stairs. And then it's like, this is definitely not normal, but we get married to feeling like shit,
Yeah. And I think, again, for anybody sort of listening, considering doing a prep to get to that stage lean, which is a whole new level of lean, you may well have done photo shoots and things before, and the stage and the lights is a whole new level, isn't it? The reality in those last few weeks where you need a wee and perhaps you only got a toilet upstairs, and you just think, I'd almost rather just sit here and just wet myself. I don't think my legs can do it. And again, it's that mindset thing, because then you have to just recognize that, this is a choice. There's a way I can fix this. I can go to the fridge and but I'm not going to. So I'm gonna just note down how I'm feeling. I'm gonna go to the loo, because wetting yourself as a 40-year-old plus woman is ridiculous. And also then, and you talk to your coach, don't you? You just say, well, this is how I'm feeling in the gym, because I think that's the other part of it that you learn, is that sometimes actually, the calories come down too much and you're massively compromising your output. That's not good either. So that's been a difference this time as well, where with the coaching that I've had of having planned refeeds. Never had a refeed before. So, and again, around the children, it was kind of saying, okay, well, I've got such and such an event. I'm happy not to eat there. But do you think I'm going to be doing a refeed? If I am, probably I'll have it on the Sunday rather than you told me to have it on the Thursday. If I can hold on a little bit longer, and then I can have, something planned. So yeah, that works quite well as well. But it is always remembering it's a choice, and just trying to smile through it.
Yeah, keep the smile on. And like you say, communicating with your coach. Have you discussed sort of where your off season is going to head and if you will compete again, or is that very much sort of how things go?
So yeah, so basically that's a conversation that's going to happen this weekend. So that's been planned for this weekend. So we've been messaging back and forth, and so again, massive honor, had an invite to PCA Worlds, which is in 3 days' time, Sunday. But I would have come back from Lanzarote and had 19 days to get ready. And there was a tiny part of me for a fleeting moment that did think, okay, this might be the only shot I get at this. Such an honor to be invited. And I've always said, if you get invited to something, you should show up. You should just do it. This scenario was different because the only way I could have done that would be to sacrifice the family holiday. And that just, there are lines that I won't cross. So yeah, what we've basically done is to sort of had a little bit of time thinking about that decision. And then it was to say to sort of come home, normalize everything, because I think as well in the first few weeks you expect you just get back to normal, but for me this bouncing ball, it's not just in terms of what calories you're putting in, what training you're doing, it's also just your thought processes and mentally how you feel hormonally as a female. Definitely there's sort of bouncing around. Your menstrual cycle and things like that are always well, for me, are always affected. So I wanted to leave quite a few weeks before making decisions, really, about next year. But yeah, so that's going to happen this weekend.
I look forward to an update. I will be messaging you asking you what the decision is. But again, it's, that's what a coach is for, to bounce off ideas. And, sometimes I get on the call to my coach or I'm working with clients and questions come up that I didn't sort of think that we're going to, and then it sparks a different option, or, it doesn't, even if you said, right, I'm not going to compete next year, and then it got to January and you thought, I want to, it's an ever evolving journey, and you can change your mind.
And I think that also, this sounds like a plant, like, oh, in your podcast, but this is true. This is true. The people
I appreciate
who may
it.
listen to this who know me, no, I do not blow sunshine up people's asses, but I have no time at all. Yeah, I have to work quite hard on a daily basis to sort of not be too blunt and direct and everything else, because I am. But one of the things that I'd heard on the podcast was about taking time to say, actually, you've had some feedback from the shows, and if you've competed right up until the end of the season, which is more or less I have now, and then you're planning on jumping back into shows at the start of the very next season, you're not giving yourself any time to have a true off season, and to make significant changes to your physique. And one of the things I've worked on really hard this year has been growing my glutes. So I found it really, really hard. Always tried, always just, for whatever reason, just didn't get that mind-muscle connection. And building the team again is so important, because, so again, worked in the gym and with one of the trainers who's got the most amazing glutes you'd ever see. So Abby is fantastic. So did a specific program with her, which then was sort of fed into very much by the coaches, Paul and Lou, and just really, really, so I grew as much as I could, but it was relatively a short time period. It was just a couple of months because I had to get back onto prep ready for the British finals. So that was another consideration of saying, like, well, actually, do you take a whole year off? Really assess what you want, where are your weaknesses, what are you trying to achieve? And as I've said, really at the very start of all of this, is the first thing to do is say, okay, what's my goal? But then it's saying, is that achievable? So, and also, is there any point bringing the same package to the Saxon Classic in March 2023 that you did in 2022? Some people, I think, do get enjoyment from just doing serial shows, and and that's a thing in its own right. For most of us, I think it's about progression.
And it gets to a point as well where you want to, if you've done a few seasons, I think it gets to that point where you're gonna take this a bit more seriously in regards to, would it be better to, like you say, have a year and then come back at the Saxon Classic in 2024 and look completely different, well, you know, improved,
Yeah,
feel like you've made a really good productive off season. I think sometimes in the first few seasons you can do every year and you think, oh yeah, you know, I'm loving it, and then you get to a point where it's like, actually I want to see big changes on my physique.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's all about sort of really having a good long hard think about what you want, and also for me, with the family commitments, with the work commitments. So yeah, that side of things, I think this year I don't feel as though anything has been compromised family-wise, because like I say, I've just been sort of uber organized and just managed to weave it all in.
Yeah,
But you know, certainly in terms of work, depending on your job, if you're going for, say, a career promotion, or you know, being realistic to do that, as well as if you've got a family with children, as well as sort of really trying to push in the sport of bodybuilding, I think, you know, possibly might be unrealistic. So that's another reason why for me, I've just sort of thought, right, I need to think carefully, and I'm old.
I think that's
I think sometimes the body needs a really good rest at this age. I've been super lucky. I've never been injured, touch wood quickly. I've never sustained any bodybuilding injuries. And again, I think it comes down to having a PT, having that coach, you know, that guidance, always watching your form, you know. So I've been really lucky in that regard, but I am aware that if and when I do pick up injuries, you know, it's going to take so much longer to heal. So I feel like my body could probably do with a year to just recover from you know, the grind that I put it through. Yeah,
I'd say that's actually a good way to wrap up the pod today, because, you know, almost going through your whole journey and then having that reflective moment of, you know, actually I do need to look after myself. I need to prioritize health, and those things that we do compromise in a prep, you know, to round it up there and have that reflection is a super cool way to, you know, end our journey of where you're currently at and what that decision might entail and all of those factors that are going to go into it.
yeah. I think you know, basically it is about, like as you said, it's about doing what you want to do, making those decisions, and ultimately, as long as it doesn't harm those around you and the relationships around you, you stop when you want to stop. You know, I have had people say to me, oh, you know, you've gone too far. I don't, you know, your shoulders are too big. Oh, I don't like the way they look. Even my mum, actually, my very first photo, it said,
Thanks, Mum.
I don't like muscly women. Achavi is what she said, which is Welsh for saying yuck. Great. So, well, you know, luckily, mum, they're not your delts, they're mine, and I want them bigger. So, you know, you focus on your goal, and yeah, it is just being clear what you want, and hopefully building that team around you, isn't it? So that, you know, you can bring people with you, because bodybuilding is such an inclusive sport. If you choose it to be, and if you have the right people around you, it doesn't have to be isolating at all. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it's really good to, you know, actually hear your journey today in full, you know, because we have met and talked, but it's really interesting to hear from, you know, everyone who comes into the sport, where they've come from and what it's given them. And I would be interested in getting you back on potentially, you know, next year when you're more into off season, and to talk about how that's been going and more about what your decisions are moving forward, if you're up for that.
I'd love it. Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to follow you or reach out, if, you know, something resonates from today's episode, is Instagram the best place?
Yeah, so I'm just at Delyth Butler. I'm like I say, I'm pretty straightforward, really. That's me, Delyth Butler. I don't have any fancy tags. And similarly, you know, I was saying this to somebody the other day about like first timer questions. There's so many things when you do your first show, and once you know these things, they just make a massive difference. So, you know, if I can help anyone along the way, that I really do enjoy that. I enjoy giving back. So, yeah, if there's anything that I can do to help people on their journey, with the proviso, people have asked me this in the past. you have to have a coach. They've got to be your guidance.
Yeah.
But more things like, you know, sort of basic,
About
what do
your
I
hair and
need
makeup
for show
or something.
day? Yeah,
Yeah.
what do I need for, you know, all of those little things. And now it's so easy. Pack my case, I know exactly what's going in. It's so easy. The first couple of shows, gosh, you know, you get there and you think, oh, I haven't got this, I need this, I did, you know. Yeah, so I'd be more than happy to help.
Thank you. I'll put your name in the description as well. And if anyone wants to share it on their stories, I'm always super, super grateful for that, because it just spreads the word of the podcast and helps others, you know, on their bodybuilding journey. So I will speak to you after this weekend, because I want to know what's happening. But thank you again, Delyth, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, take care, Sarah. Thanks so much. Bye.